Okay, so in the past 2 semesters, I feel like I have like really developed my voice like in a professional way, in a sense where I can use it economically for performance. Um, and I've also just learned a lot of different things in general about the voice and the uses it has and how it can be used. So, for example, I learned that there are 13 voice figures, which I wasn't aware of, and actually looking back at one of my first ever vlogs, that's something that I remember finding quite shocking, and that, but also something that's quite cool with these 13 voice figures, and this is something that Joe is still talks about a lot, which is that you can combine all of these voice figures to make a recipe, which will create 6 different voice qualities, and I've from that grown to understand what the different figures are and how I as an actor can actually use them economically, as so not to affect my vocal folds negatively, but to still create appropriate sounds that may be required for certain characters or intentions or whatnot. Or even in one of our voice challenges when we were creating sounds of atmospheres. So having learned these voice figures and how to put them together has really helped me think about how I'm using my voice. That's probably the biggest lesson I've learned, is how to use it so that it's economical for me and I'm not doing anything that is going to negatively impact my voice in the future. Some other challenges I've faced were probably getting to grips with the different figures and voice qualities, and understanding what it was exactly that differentiated them, because some of them can be quite similar, and some of them are completely different, and that's fair enough, but some of them are very similar, and some of them I would have the same problem with, but the problem I would have to be dealt with slightly differently because it was a different voice figure or voice quality. But I think there was also a bit of a difficulty in understanding how I could use those voice qualities and figures without having to use such high effort levels as well. How it took me a while to understand how my body was comfortable with creating these sounds while still doing the mechanically correct thing for me, without trying too hard, as so to strain myself or try so hard that I end up doing something completely wrong and completely different. I think one thing that I've found in rehearsals that would be a challenge that I've faced in terms of voice is that I'm not always 100% certain what my voice is doing exactly. So it can be a little bit difficult in rehearsals and in performance, when I don't have someone telling me or helping me identify whether I'm doing the voice quality figure efficiently for myself. And so that's probably another difficulty that I do face now and will probably continue to face, but until I properly get to grips with the voice figures and qualities. I'd say that I've responded quite well to learning the figures and then actually combining them to create the voice qualities, especially because we learn the figures with we learned the qualities with songs, and I felt like that made it so much easier for us to understand how we could actually use those figures, and we could hear it really clearly because it was in a song. So that was really helpful, and also combining the figures into voice quality made it a lot easier for me to understand them individually and see how they actually worked well together and why they worked together to create a particular sound. I think one thing though that I faced a challenge with most in terms of learning about the voice qualities in like speech and falsetto and whatnot was was actually more of a personal thing, and it was just overcoming a fear of feeling embarrassed of like my own vanity, and just sort of being scared of what it would sound like if I did it wrong. And so a lot of it, not a lot of it, but so some of the lessons I would spend, just trying to sing nicely when we were putting the voice qualities into song. But actually, in what our lecturer said that made it really useful was that that sounds too pretty and it's not supposed to. Just get the voice quality down and understand what your voice is doing. And so because of that, I think I then found it easy to just take a step back and understand what my body was doing, what sound I was creating with my voice, and what that felt like, and did it feel okay? Did it hurt? Was it uncomfortable? And how could I change things so that it was more suited to what my body maybe needed? In terms of our spectrogram assessment, this was an assessment that I was quite nervous for, because there's something a bit nerve-wracking about just sitting in a room with one person and just making sounds with your voice. But I'm overall pretty glad with how it went. And I thought it was really cool to see how different different voice figures show up on a spectrogram. Something that I did to help me with this was I wrote down on this piece of paper, which you can't really see, but I wrote down all the true vocal folds, on and offsets, the body covers, the false vocal folds, and the AES. And I wrote down, and those were just the umbrella terms, and then I wrote down the actual terms and what they should either look like on the spectrogram, or what it should feel like you're doing when you're creating that sound. For example, for true vocal fold on an offset smooth, it's supposed to sort of look like lighthouses on the spectrogram is how it's supposed to come up as. But also when you're actually producing the sound, it's like a car's going past. And so I've got a lot of information like that on here, just little things that could help me out. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why I really liked this assessment, because it was so much more about, you were either sort of right or wrong with with the sound that you created, but you were very much able to have a personal involvement and say, well, this is how I think this is what it means to me. So to me, that's what it looks like on the graph. So I can write that down, and to me, this is what it sounds like when I'm doing it. So that's what I'm going to do. And so it could be very personal, and you were completely able to go in, and you're completely able to go in and from your own notes completely do the assessment. And I thought it was quite a good assessment. Something that and the reason I thought it was also really good is because of the feedback that we got back. So a lot of my feedback was mainly that there was like continual breath through most of my spectrogram. And I'd even noticed, because I was practicing on my phone as well, I got a spectrogram app, and I'd noticed the same thing. And I think a lot of that is down to just the fact that from my own personal bad habits of smoking and whatnot, but I think it's definitely something that it's a good way to know if there is an issue with something in your voice, and so I think it's really useful. In terms of how we've incorporated technical voice practice into our work, I think it's been incorporated massively now, especially even if you're not thinking about it. or even if you don't go out of your way, because I think a lot of us actually still forget that we have a voice for a reason, and that we can use the voice for a certain thing, for certain intentions, or to create a different character. And a lot of us do still just rely on our own voices, and we only ever slightly raise them or lower them or change the pitch slightly. But I think we've certainly now, especially after having these classes, gone away and definitely had more of a thought of how this will at least impact our voice. Before, if I did a scene and I was shouting, I'd walk away and go, oh god, I shouted. But now I think, if I'm going to shout and I'm going to be shouting for a certain amount of time, how can I do that so that I don't negatively impact my voice, so that it's economical and so that it makes sense to the character? Because in no real life situation are you just shouting for 5 minutes straight. And so actually voice has also really helped me definitely work out and carve out intentions of my characters, because it's such an important thing to understand what your character wants and needs and is trying to get from someone else in a scene, especially in a duologue like we did. And if you can carve out how they sound in your head and how they sound at certain moments, you can start to create a real person. Something about my duologue though was that what I had thought about the character, I sort of exaggerated too much. I was playing Miss Julie from Miss Julie, and from my feedback, one of my issues was that it was too whiny, and so actually it went from, how useful is it to be whiny all the time if you're not actually crying, which I wasn't for a lot of it, and so I was just whiny, but there was no actual crying. So it's sort of, not only does it lose the effect in terms of a dramatic performance, but also it's just not useful to do, and it probably stopped me from creating better choices in as terms of my character, because I kept my voice at this one rate, which can potentially also have gotten quite annoying. Again, I was really breathy, but I think that due to having done voice practice for these past 2 semesters, it's helped me definitely to understand which qualities are most suitable for characters and their intentions. So yeah.